We are live.
All right, here we go. Sorry about that. Seems like it's getting more complicated every time we do it.
Too
But
many buttons. Too many buttons.
hi, this is Curt Verone,
And Brad Pinsky.
and we're ready for another edition of Fire Law Roundup. This time, oh boy, hold on a second. Sorry about that. Seems like it's getting more
I
complicated.
love the love
Uh,
the
I've
live
got so
takes.
many screens over here that I really we need to hire an AV guy or
True.
gal. But we're it's Memorial Day, and we're here on May 27th of 2024 for another edition of Fire Law Roundup. Got some craziness going on out there in the
Oh
fire
my
law world.
God. And I got to tell you, this first one we're going to talk about is in Massachusetts. And it took me so long to figure out what the heck is happening. So this is not so much a legal issue as you say, you just can't make this stuff up. So we've got a Massachusetts firefighter. He's now been arrested, right? He's not convicted, just to be clear, but he's been arrested on federal identity theft charges. And figuring out who this guy actually is takes a lot of time. But ultimately, he is charged with stealing the identity of a deceased individual, and he embezzled from the firefighters union. And
Well, that's
he
from a previous fire department.
previous
That's the whole
previous
thing. He previously worked for the was it Norwell?
Melrose, I think, right?
No, he was previously with the Norwell Fire Department back in the 2000s. And in 2010, he apparently embezzled from the union. He was the union treasurer, big surprise there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And for the same reasons we talk about volunteer theft, but he allegedly, or he was convicted, he pled
Convicted, yeah.
guilty to embezzlement and larceny of about $46,000. And I couldn't find out whether or not he was terminated or whether he resigned, but he no longer was employed by the Norwell Fire Department after that. He didn't serve any jail time. He did have to pay restitution, and apparently he had some gambling issues. That's what it appears, because as part of the investigation, they ordered him to appear to the local police department to answer some questions, bring in the union's books, and he refused. He didn't show up for that. And then, excuse me, he apparently stopped showing up for his shifts. They must have figured out where he used to frequent, and they got an arrest warrant for him. They contacted Connecticut State Police, and they went over to one of the bigger gambling resorts in this area, which is Foxwoods, and he had
Yeah.
apparently been staying there, and they apprehended him there. He's extradited back to Massachusetts, and he ends up pleading guilty to embezzlement and larceny. So that was back in 2010, 2011. Then in 2018,
Well, stop there for a second.
okay,
Your article notes correctly so is that he was ordered deported back in 91,
that was
right?
even before that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, following a
Yeah.
burglary conviction, not
Yeah.
charges, conviction.
Yeah, so really, I don't know. As I was putting the story together, because as much as you spent time with it, I probably spent 3 or 4 hours reading different news issues, news posts about it, reading the U.S. Attorney's information, reading the criminal complaint.
Wow.
But I also went back into my own database, and I had this case, the Norwell case, in my database from back in 2010, 2011. And I didn't have the fact that before he was hired as a firefighter, he had a burglary conviction. So there's a question right there. How did he get around that one? But at any rate, he was originally born in Vietnam. And, when I was with the Providence Fire Department in 1979, that was when they call them the boat people. But a lot of the people who were escaping the communist takeover in Vietnam ended up coming to the United States, and there was a lot of resettlement going on in Providence and many other places. So he was apparently one of those. He was only, I think he was 4 years old when he was brought here, but he ended up getting charged and convicted of burglary. He somehow then, and that was in 1991, he somehow got on the Norwell Fire Department in 2004, 2005 timeframe there, served 6 years with them, served 4 years as the treasurer, and then apparently had this gambling problem. And so bottom line is he loses that job. And then in 2018 now,
That's
he
another one.
he decides to take someone else's identity if it's the same person. Now, there's still, I think, it's the more you get into it, the more it looks like it's the same person. But he's accused in 2018 of obtaining a birth certificate of a person who had died, getting a replacement social security card with the gentleman's the person who died's social security number, which was already there. Taking that information, getting a Massachusetts driver's license, getting his EMTB, and I think he may
Which
have
is
actually,
incredible.
and then he already had it. It'd be like you going back to, and taking an EMT class again. You're going to
Yep.
sail through it. And then there was something in the criminal complaint that said that he also got his Massachusetts paramedic, and he gets into the Mass Fire Academy, graduates this past year, and there was pictures of him. And they, again, I didn't want to use copyrighted pictures, but there's a picture of him standing in front of a Mass Fire Academy ladder truck, holding an axe. And there's a previous picture of him back when he was with Norwell, and it looks like the same person, a little older, a little heavier, but looks like the same person. And they use facial recognition to identify the different driver's license pictures of him. But the bottom line is he screwed up in his first, go around with the fire service. He then steals somebody's identity.
Right.
And then goes through it again. And I guess he really, he wants to be a fire. He ought to go out to California where they have that, what's
Convict.
that, fire country or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Convict firefighting. Absolutely.
Yeah, it'd probably be they wouldn't let him get to a casino, so he'd probably be probably be in good hands. And if he really loves the fire service,
Right. But what's incredible here is this could never happen on the police side. Why? Because they fingerprint. Why the heck and this is really my takeaway, and I've preached this before, in the fire service, we were in people's homes. We were in secure facilities, whether they're nuclear or up by me, Army bases, Air Force bases. We have hospitals, sensitive places, right? Dangerous places. And yet any idiot with a false identity, a criminal background check, gets to be a firefighter. It's interesting. I hate to admit it, but I was watching Chicago Fire the other week, and it was an episode where they steal a fire truck, right? And they re-letter the Chicago Fire Department as Indianapolis. And there's a line in here, though, that struck me. And they said something like, well, why are you stealing fire trucks to blow up a place? And they said, because nobody ever looks, right? Nobody ever thinks anything of it. And yet, again, we're in sensitive places. Even if it's petty larceny, we don't fingerprint. I'm not aware of too many states, if any states, I don't know if you are, that actually fingerprint. New York State, we can't even run a criminal background check.
Well, see, I think that, and Mass is probably the same way. In Providence, we were fingerprinted.
Okay.
And I know when I got to go for my concealed carry permit renewal, I've got to get fingerprinted. But many states, because they're concerned about discrimination issues and concerns, that they've made it very difficult to do certain types of background checks on people. And again, I don't know about Mass. I'm just saying it sort of in general, there's a certain agenda, political agenda, social agenda that really kind of looks down on, getting to the bottom, look at, right.
Yeah. I will end my portion with this. I had a client in New York say, we want to do a fingerprinting DCJS, right? Division of Criminal Justice Service federal background check. How do we do it? They're like, you're the lawyer, you figure it out. I said, New York State doesn't allow it. And they're like, figure it out. So I figured it out. What did we do? We required every applicant to apply for a gun permit. We paid the fee, right? But they would fingerprint, and we would then get a criminal background check. If you can't get a pistol permit, you can't join the fire department. So we thought it was the only way to get around a federal background check. In New York, for example, you could do a state background check. Our court system, you can get right online, pay $75 and do a state background check. But that assumes you are who you are. When you steal someone's identity, that doesn't check.
Right.
So fingerprinting is the only way to do it. And yet the fire service, and it's not our fault. It's, the government's faults, states, federal. Why aren't we fingerprinting firefighters? And I'll tell you, again, we've got a whole bunch of fire departments, or mostly rules, serving Fort Drum up here with the 110th Mountain Division. I mean, this is some serious stuff where we're not, the government's not taking their security safely enough. If I was a terrorist, I would join a fire department and right near whatever site, and you're going to get a call there and you're going to get right in. I think our government needs to take a hard look at who should and shouldn't be a firefighter and what tests we're going to do. Fingerprinting, that's the only one we could do.
Well, I think our government's a little schizophrenic these days, because on the one hand, they're looking at, personal due process and discrimination concerns and protection of the employee and all that. And that's, certainly it's something that needs to be considered. But on the other hand, if this guy could pull this in the same state, I mean, if he decided to do this in a different state, he probably would have gotten away with it. But there was just too many overlapping issues that happened in the same state. But I mean, if he went to Alaska or someplace out on the West Coast, he might have actually gotten away with this.
And imagine he was a terrorist, not a crook, what he could have done. Right. So, okay, let's move on to the next one. This is really simple, but it's just another example you provide of how fire departments get sued. So we're in California. We have a hotel who's now suing the city, as well as a building inspector who I presume is immune, and a fire marshal who I presume is immune. But they claim the hotel owners claim that the fire department and all the actors have red tagged a building, and we'll explain that. Right? It basically means it's uninhabitable, and they've deemed this hotel uninhabitable, costing them millions of dollars. Well, right? And I don't know California's law, but I'm assuming it's going to get dismissed on immunity charges, unless there's some motive or hate scheme going on.
They're alleging there's some sort of discrimination involved in this, but
yeah,
this is tough. And I almost called you when I found the case and I started working. I almost called you because I had never heard the term red carding, or red tagging. Had you ever heard of that?
Yes, but only on furnaces. When you red tag a furnace, it's shut down. So if a building inspector, we used to do that, it goes into a place, you can red tag a furnace, you can red tag an electrical box, and it even says on it, it's illegal to remove this. But I've never heard it for a whole building.
Yeah, I never heard of it. And I don't know if it's just a California thing or whatever, but I put a copy of the, red tag in the post so people could see it. But apparently it's basically an order that no one is to go in the building. It basically doesn't have a CO, and so the allegation is discrimination, violation of due process, and I'm not sure what the ethnicity or race of the owners is, but they're alleging that they're being targeted because of their. And it happens from time to time that you have one fire marshal, one fire inspector that says you've got to do A, B, and C, and so the people do A, B, and C, and now another fire marshal, whatever, comes in and says, "Oh no, A, B, and C isn't enough. You don't have to do C, but you got to do D, E, and F."
Right.
And I understand the frustration of the property owner when that kind of stuff happens, and also codes change as well. So, but I don't know how much of that is this is going on
and
here.
Uninhabitable is a different classification than fix your furnace or fix this, right? Fix a window or fix the gate. I mean, this is uninhabitable. So I would like to know, but I sense there's much more to it than just, a furnace, a window, a railing, something. This is like the whole property.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, oh, hey, this is me. So let's head. I was reading this. I'm like, all right, that's my case. So we'll head to New York. See, Curt and I actually do practice law, and but this was a case. So we're going to start in New York, in a small little area called town of Richland. And in New York State, just to give a little bit of background, because this is a resolution to the case we talked about, in New York State, the Governor Cuomo, I think, way back, the son, not the father, Cuomo, both were governors, he passed a property tax limit that says property taxes can only increase for either school or fire or town or village, whatever, any government, by only 2% or the CPI, whatever is lower. So basically the inflation index or the consumer price index. If it goes above 2%, it's still capped at, you can only raise your taxes by 2%. And this was to stop everybody just from, increasing their taxes, all the municipalities. But every municipality can override it. And to override it, it's a very simple step. You have a resolution of 3 or 4/5 of the board, or however many people are on it, 60% of the board to override it. And then you file a document with the controller. You file your resolution. It's just filing, and you file the resolution with the controller. The controller then doesn't have any approval. They just have notice of it. In any event, this case we talked about because just like other things, we're teaching a lot about the law. And what we learned here is standing and statute of limitations. So when we got the call that our client was being sued, I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, the controller has the right to take that money from the extra money above the 2% from, in this case, a fire district who raised its taxes. They about doubled their taxes, but their taxes previously were $80,000. Tough to fund the fire department on $80,000. So they basically doubled it. I think they added about 100,000. In any event, the 4 taxpayers got together, they sued, and they're like, you violated the statute. And, yeah, we may have. But the primary jurisdictional questions that Curt and I want the viewers to learn as we do these kind of like mini law school sessions, right? You watch a number of these, you learn a lot. And the first question always is, does the person who's suing have standing to sue? And in this case, I argued that this law does not create what's called a private right of action. Meaning that a citizen can sue in place of the government. And the court agreed. And we also raised other issues saying, well, you waited too long to sue. And the court agreed with that. They waited too long. They blew the statute of limitations by a number of months. And there were a bunch of other things. And one of them, which you'll see in the decision if you read it, I raised it. I said, they kind of look like they're trying to use this statute, which allows you to sue a taxpayer to actually sue municipalities for wasting money. Now, normally that would be pretty, good, a good way to win under the suit. They didn't raise it. They didn't mention it specifically, but I'm like, listen, I better address it out of caution. And what I said is, that doesn't apply to a fire district. You can't sue a fire district for mismanaging funds. So in the end, the court agrees with us and our firm and dismisses the case, mostly saying there's no private right to sue under the statute and you missed the statute of limitations. So that, coupled with the next case we're going to talk about, Miami, really shows it doesn't matter what's alleged. You have to get past certain obstacles, and this is why they have attorney malpractice in some cases. If you waited too long to sue, or if the taxpayers waited too long to sue, or if you don't have a right to sue, just because there's a wrong doesn't mean there's a remedy. So that's like first-year law school stuff. In any event, it's not always easy. There is a lot of tests that you have to do, but ultimately the court, I say this, self-serving, got the right decision. I strongly doubt there'll be an appeal in it, but so be it. But then the next one, not to jump on, cut me off if you want.
No, I just only because some of the folks that were involved in the Miami case reached out to me, and they, not complaining, but they noted that we're quick to include the allegations and talk about the allegations, but we don't follow up sometimes, and that's not necessarily true. We follow up to the best that we can. I don't have a staff of people. You and I are doing this kind of on our days off here, but when we do become aware of a follow-up, and in particular where there's been certain hurtful allegations, and in this case, there were a number of really hurtful allegations. If you read the complaint, I've got a link in the article to the original story about this, but they're hurtful to the people who were accused, and they would like a little bit of vindication. And,
they deserve it now.
Well, yeah. And, at least, I mean, we don't know what actually happened. All we know is we're reporting factually in that someone filed a lawsuit and made allegations. And now factually, and that's factual. And we don't know if the allegations are true, but the fact that they were made. And we have now a jury verdict that was in favor of the people who were accused of having done some things wrong. Now, Juries can get it wrong. That doesn't mean that the person, factually, the person who was accused of doing something was right. It doesn't mean the plaintiff in this case was wrong. It just meant that, a jury, after hearing all of this, said there's not enough for us to award damages here. So again, it's not really a total vindication, but at least, folks can get a better understanding that the allegations apparently weren't as clear cut as they were originally put forth.
Right. And look, to our friends in Miami, I personally get it. I, as a fire chief, was sued in my capacity as a fire chief, and allegations are made. They end up on the front page of the paper. And worse, I didn't even make it to depositions after years of, a lot of it was dismissed on jurisdictional grounds. But ultimately the insurance company, and this is worse for the fire chief, admittedly, the insurance company says, you know what? We can pay this off for 20 grand, just pay 20 grand or whatever it is, I'm making that number up, but usually it's the cost of attorney's fees, and we'll just pay them something to go away. It's cheaper than, winning even. And the fire chief or the person, who's the target doesn't get any vindication. There's no headline says jury dismissed, right? There's no vindication, but that's not the real world. And I guess I look at it as people will think what they think. Right. And and to all the viewers, especially Miami at the moment, Curt, you pick these up so quickly. You get the complaint. And a lot of times, and to our credit, a lot of times they're saying, like with the FDNY one the other week, oh, this is going to get dismissed. This is, jurisdictional grounds. This is motion to dismiss. And I think I even said, like, FDNY, if you're listening, here's what I would do under that New York law. You pick these up so quick that we don't get time to see the answer or the response that's filed. We're just guessing on what could happen. But you're right, we don't know the facts. But I don't think, and I hope we don't, I don't think we ever judge anybody except the criminals who were convicted, right? But even with the last guy, whatever his real name is, we said, hey, these are allegations. Some were convictions, so it's true as a matter of law, and some are allegations. We don't know, but hopefully we do our best to vindicate. But let's invite everybody, right? Just like Miami did. They get a hold of you. People write you. I can't even imagine how many emails a day you get. But if there's another side, present it, right? If your lawyer allows you, if you can, and we'll present it. We're not taking sides.
I've invited people to come on, and I understand too. They don't want to come on. Many of them don't want to come on. But I think my sort of split here is, do we not talk about the allegations? In which case the fire service is not aware of what's going on in these lawsuits.
Right.
In an effort to not hurt people's feelings, and not hurt, and it's more than feelings. I mean, the allegations in this are really hurtful. Okay. Really, really hurtful. So do we not talk about it? Maybe just say, oh, there was a lawsuit, but we're not going to talk about the allegations. Or do we go through the allegations so that people see what it looks like? And then, okay, you're going to have some butthurt over it. And that's not our intent. We're not trying to hurt anybody. And we're certainly not saying the allegations are true. Right. But we are saying truly that the allegations were made. Right. And then, hopefully in a case like this, we're at least able to say the allegations were apparently not proven. And so, but again, it's not a total vindication. But again, that's sort of my consternation, that do we put this stuff out there so people can learn from it, or do we just pretend like these allegations aren't being made? And obviously you and I both agree it's more important for the fire service, and like I said in the blog, those that care about the fire service, those that are helping firefighters, which include our HR people, legal, risk management, union reps, that whole cadre of people that are helping keep us out there on the front lines, need to know this.
And some of it, I think of one of the things we constantly see. We see plaintiffs who kept notes of conversations. On this day, this person said this, and it makes into a complaint, right? We then try to offer suggestions based on the facts of what could the fire department, the fire chief, the union, whoever, done better. And so without the facts, we can't help anybody, without the allegations at least, we can't help anybody figure out what somebody else could have done better. This is no different than close calls and anything else where we look at a fire and we're just going to not be critical. We're going to evaluate critically, right? And we're going to say what could have done better. Now that we have time to armchair quarterback it for the next one, what could do better? And look, this isn't like a fire where you don't have time to prepare. Most of the cases we cover, if you knew better how to react, you've got time. You're not making a split-second decision like at a fire scene.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what we do is important, but I get everybody. Nobody wants more publicity to somebody throwing false or even true charges at them. Nobody wants more publicity. We offer it, but it's for a lesson, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, you've got to do this one. This one's Rhode Island. For the viewers, as I'm preparing this last night, I'm reading this, and I went through this. It must take me an hour and a half just to read this. I finally give up, and I say to Curt, you got to do this. I cannot. I get it. I get the general theme, but the specific factual allegations is way too complicated.
Well, we could spend an hour just on the one case because there's a lot of moving parts in this one. But we have a relatively small career department in the town of Tiverton who's had a history
State of Rhode Island.
In Rhode Island, yes, I'm sorry, Tiverton, Rhode Island, who has a history of not being a great place to work. And this should not reflect upon the people, friends of mine, clients of mine that work there. But I forget the total number of firefighters in the department, but they're down to 17, which is barely enough to staff with mandatory overtime. They're really struggling. They're one of the lowest paid fire departments in the state. They're constantly hiring new members and then watching them go on to a bigger department or a more highly paid department.
Right.
And so they've got a high turnover. That's a problem. And they've gone through several chiefs. And I know that there's been a lot of animosity there between the town and the firefighters. And you may recall last October, we actually talked about a case here where they, and again, I don't know where it came from. I don't believe it came from the fire chief because the chief is a former student of mine at Providence College. He went through the fire science program at Providence College, and I know him, and I know him to be a decent person. But he, the department came out with a social media policy and then immediately tried to discipline the union for violating the brand new social media policy. And it's just, first of all, social media policy was unconstitutional in and of itself.
Obviously, he didn't go to your class.
But then there's, well, I don't think he did it. That's what I'm saying. I don't think I think he's got bosses, and his bosses told him, and he said, like a good,
Right.
soldier, yes, sir, I'll do it. Bottom line is, another friend of mine who handles a lot of litigation in this area, federal court litigation, immediately filed a federal lawsuit, First Amendment lawsuit, and not to mention the way that they implemented it, but it was pretty clearly trying to silence the union's right to free speech. So the town immediately backed down. And they said, okay, we're not going to discipline the union, and we're going to rescind the social media policy. So little game of chess there that was going on. There were a few other things apparently that happened in prompting the union president to go into the fire chief's office for a meeting and basically threaten the fire chief with, we're going to take a vote of no confidence against you. And you don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see that happen. Why don't you just resign? And it's one of those unfortunate conversations that ends up happening sometimes in collective bargaining. And it's also why there's union free speech. In addition to the First Amendment, there's also concerted activity protection for union related speech. So you get kind of a couple of different things going on. Well, the fire chief apparently huddled up with city officials, town officials, and they decided to suspend the union president and move toward termination for threatening the fire chief, which prompted the same attorney that filed the suit in October to hit him with both barrels. Yeah. And so they're filing a First Amendment suit, a retaliation suit. Some of the things that were alleged to have been at issue here would fall under a Whistleblower Protection Act that we have here in Rhode Island. There were certain things that weren't being done right, that were legal violations that he was bringing to the chief's attention. And so that's basically the complaint that you see under this Tiverton article. And I think it's really unfortunate. The department's in turmoil. And I really don't think the problem is with the fire chief. I think it's at some point, I don't know where in local government it is, but I really, unfortunately, when you're the chief, you're the fall guy. But I think that there's powers further in government that are they're probably gleeful that this is happening.
Do you know, is this a high, I suspect low, but is this a high or low call volume in department? Do you know?
I would call it medium. It's got some rural areas. It's got some suburban areas. It certainly isn't a city by any stretch. It's more rural, but it's a little bit beyond what a volunteer fire department could handle. I think it's just a little bit too busy, and so they have an understaffed career department.
Which typically, what they say, the best thing for morale is a good structure fire, right? And we wouldn't say that to the public, but the fire department knows what we're talking about. And the fact is that in low volume places, people get antsy. They want to go to the higher call volume. So it's a big problem for the municipalities, right? Because there's a lot of time on your hands. You got to figure out how to keep people interested. And the worst part, which isn't this issue, but is the training issue. You pay to train people, and then they laterally move, and that's become a big issue. Can we penalize? Can we charge? Can we have contracts? Right? All these types of things so people don't leave after the municipality's paid. It's not this issue, but I look at the low morale, and the first question I had is, what is causing the low morale? It's hard to imagine that one person, even though it's the chief, is really causing low morale. Now, the chief may be constrained by the municipality, or it may not just be a great environment to work at. Maybe it's old stations, maybe it's old trucks, maybe it's low call volume. I don't know what's causing low morale, but what are you going to do when you're the chief? You can only improve morale so much. Pep talks only work so much. So I don't know.
I think there's a couple of things that are going on there, but the low pay, the mandatory overtime,
of course,
and just everyone is struggling to get people these days. So that I think it's all sort of contributing, and I think it's unfortunate. I think they all need to take a big step back, take a deep breath, and sort of, try to resolve the problems instead of, trying to play a heavy-handed disciplinary, we're going to teach you to come in here and threaten us kind of approach.
Yeah. Well, let's end on, if you haven't watched this, you need to watch this. Now, full disclosure, I have some involvement. I don't know if I told you, but I have some involvement in this case. I know one of the actors because I represent somebody that person works for.
Okay,
so
well, I'll do it then.
I'm happy to talk about it, but I just, it's look, we're going to talk about what's on the video. And my lesson before you get too into this is, guys, there are cameras everywhere. Right? And your desire to complain and belittle people, even if they're frequent flyers, even if they don't need an ambulance, even if anything, you better be real confident how you're acting, because you are probably on camera or probably on a phone, right? And in this case, and tee it up to Curt, it was on a Ring doorbell or doorbell camera.
Yeah. Yeah, really unfortunate incident just happened, I believe, last week or the week before, where an EMS crew from Catskill, New York, responded on a run, which, in my experience, it looks like the way that they would treat a frequent flyer, somebody who is abusing the system, somebody who calls all the time, and is just a pain in the neck. But let me sort of recharacterize this. You've got somebody with some sort of a cognitive issue. Okay, he's got some sort of mental disability.
Clearly, you do here.
And if you attribute that to them being a pain in the butt, you're going to handle it one way. But if you say, wait a minute, this is part of this person's condition, their mental problem is part of the condition that I'm here to treat, you might take a different. But at any rate, it was pretty callous, in my opinion, the way that the medics approached the patient.
Told him to come down on his butt on the stairs. I'm not lifting you, the female says. I'm not carrying you, where they can. But she says something like, we can't, or we don't, or we won't, right? But won't carry him down the stairs.
I'm not doing this. Yeah,
I'm not doing this.
I'm not playing this game, and so on. So, again, I don't. I understand the stress on medics and EMS personnel, which I think is a challenge, and that they're ready to save someone's life, and they go out the door and they're distracted from being able to save someone's life on a run by what they consider to be abusive nonsense.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is reflected in their behavior here.
And
may
one
be
part of the
very good
video,
medics.
right? No, and look, one part of the video, you see the person they force him to walk up into this ambulance.
Mhm.
Okay, not the best move, but so be it. They could have pulled out a stretcher, put him on it, strapped him in, put him in. But he crawls up in the ambulance, and before he gets fully on the stretcher, he falls off, but he doesn't really fall off. He kind of rolls himself off. And he's now, quote unquote, pinned between the bench seat and the stretcher. And he says, I can't move, I can't move. The part that's horrible here to watch is the male EMT medic is pulling on the leg, the person's screaming, ow, ow, ow. Now that probably is creating pain, right? But that's not a move you've ever learned in class, is to pull somebody by the leg who's pinned in an area, right? There were ways to do it. You could have gotten on stretcher, you could have helped the person up, you could have taken the stretcher out. There were a lot of
You could have made
ways.
sure it didn't happen in the first place.
Or make sure, right, by pulling the person, right, and carrying him down on a stair chair, putting him in the stretcher and taking him out. Here's, I guess, what I'm telling you, because I'm dealing with this issue almost daily now because of some of these people. Your reputation is done in every single agency in which you work at, and you will never probably get another job because you're never going to live this down. Now, I happen to like the individuals, right? One of the two individuals I know, but you're never going to live this down. So unfortunately, everybody, let's use this as a lesson. Your worst day when it's caught on film is never going to be your worst day anymore. It's going to be the rest of your life. You're not going to escape it. And the other thing I guess I'll close with this is, when somebody cuts me off in my car, you immediately get mad, right? I can't believe they cut me off. But I try to think about it. They didn't know who was in the car. It's not personal to me, right? So when they called the ambulance, they didn't know who the crew was. They're not making it personal. They're not trying to say, oh, I'm going to waste your time. I'm going to, ruin your ability to go help somebody else. So it's not up to you to get upset. It's your employer who can get upset, and you can go to your employer and say, listen, this person's, frequent flyer, wasting her time, didn't need an ambulance, whatever, but it's not your issue. And that's so true on the fire department side, the EMS side. Your department's reputation is your department's reputation. You can ruin it, you can improve it, but it's not your reputation. So stop taking action which ruins your department's, your agency's reputation, and don't put your own reputation at jeopardy. And how many times, look, everyone knows, it's not because Curt and Brad say it, you're on camera all the time, but
absolutely,
frequently you've been talking about body cams. Here's another example of cams. You're on camera.
Couple of things I want to add in there. Number one, a lot of people have been asking me about body cams for medics. And I think, now hear me out on this one.
Aside.
I think if they had body cams, this wouldn't happen.
Correct.
Because they would have realized I'm being filmed and I got to be playing my A game, not my D game.
Yep.
Because I'm being filmed. So that's sort of number one. Another perspective on this I have is that this scenario that's depicted in the video is horrendous when the public looks at it. It's absolutely horrendous, okay? Unforgivable from the public. To a jury of firefighters,
right,
it's a little bit different, because
it's almost laughable, which it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't, but if you're going to be judged by a jury of your peers, who's your peers? Are your peers the public, or your peers firefighters? Okay.
Right.
And I gotta be honest. I mean, if this was my people, we're gonna have I'm not gonna terminate somebody over this. Okay. Unless I'm forced to, but we've got to do something so that this doesn't happen again. This cannot happen again. Right. And so that would be me, but I can also see the exact same scenario where I'm the chief and I am getting pressure from the mayor and the council and the media and the public. Fire them.
Which is what's happening here, by the way. The background story to this, which is not attorney-client privilege, everybody in the county wants these people gone.
So
from
you
all
you
the
see
agencies they work for.
my point, and that's exactly my point here. So I don't think we give enough consideration to the pressure that medics are under. Because I know I've talked to many, and I've been in that situation myself. Is you're dealing with this guy, and right around the corner there's a baby choking, and you're like, we should be there at the baby choking. They shouldn't be waiting 15 minutes for a mutual aid unit to come in here.
Right.
But you're stuck with this, you know.
But it's
So
still not your issue, right? You were dispatched by someone else. You may
yes and
be
no, yes and
involved.
no, yes, and I think that's the conversation that needs to take place. Okay.
Right.
I also think that many agencies don't do enough to involve social workers when they have these kinds of frequent flyers, and that this is a social worker problem. This is a system breakdown that it falls on us because other agencies haven't effectively dealt with it. When nobody else deals with it, it falls down to us. Police departments have realized the importance of bringing in social workers and trying to prevent these types of repeated calls for assistance through getting them the help that they need. But again, I have a lot of sympathy for the medics, but I'm also, you know, streetwise enough to realize this is not going to end well for those medics.
No, it's not ending well for the medics. I can tell you, it's you know, New York State EMS is a very small community. We think, Ray, we're a whole state, but there's very few of us who don't know other people, especially if you're in the world like you and I are, where we're talking to a lot of people all the time, talking to a lot of departments. Everybody knows somebody. This is not ending well. Nobody wants to be around them. I shouldn't say nobody, but everybody I talk to is asking, how do we divest ourselves from, you know, from them and stay away from this? And, you know, but this isn't the first time that, you know, there's other issues that like this that come up. So somebody's arrested on a drug charge or a drinking and driving charge or pedophilia or child pornography charge, or right. And it's just charges, but people want to get, well, we don't want to be part of that, or they stole. I mean, there's so many examples of this where people who work for us do things and we're like, maybe they shouldn't, maybe they're not the right fit for the EMS and fire industries. But here, you know, where it's your job, the way you do your job, even though you're frustrated, maybe burnt out, but I don't know. I can't share some of this because I certainly know part of it, but you know, when the female gets out, doesn't approach the patient, is nowhere near the patient, has just assumed that there's nothing wrong going on with the patient because she's standing 20, 30, whatever feet and saying, you get yourself down the stairs. I'm not doing this. Yes, there may be frustration that you may have been in that house 100 times. It's going to be the one time there's a serious issue. And as you said, the mental disability may be the impairment that they're there for. It's not your call. That's not your job. You don't get to, right?
I agree. I agree. I bet if we sat them down, they would agree.
I know for a fact, I'm sure people are regretting, you know, how this happened. And look, you catch one person on their bad day, and that other person affects the other person. So maybe they feed off each other. Just saying, maybe they feed off each other. But just as everybody, if you're having a bad day, ask your employer to go home or clean the bathroom, something to keep you away from, you know, having the explosive, I just need, you know, to vent. Don't vent on your coworkers. Don't vent on your boss. Don't vent on your, well, you can vent on your spouse, I suppose, but and definitely don't vent on your patients or the public.
And
it's
if you
not
do,
the right form.
And if you do get fired, don't try identity theft. It doesn't work.
Well, apparently it does 2 out of 3 times, but maybe not the third. That's it for us.
All right. Well, that'll do it for another edition of Fire Law Roundup. We'll see you again next